It's making some noise before it says we're live. Here we are. Okay, everyone, horror fans. Pete is back in the Lasser cast with his co-host, Dr. Zayas God, Danny Torkel. Danny, you ready to talk about the finale of Interview with the Vampire, season 1?
Am I ever? Literally just finished the episode. I watched the first 40 minutes of it at work. I came home. I watched the last half hour, and I'm ready to go. And we got to throw up a spoiler disclaimer right away because this episode aired last night on AMC, and we're going to talk about the finale. We're going to spoil all the bloody details.
Yes.
And we are going to just get into it right away. So if you haven't watched the season finale of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire, please go and watch it. You can watch Pete and I did a review of episodes 1 through 6 right now up on our channel. And then when you get done with that, you can watch our review of the finale.
Hell yeah. Nice. Okay, so I'm jumping right to my very favorite part. It's a quote. They think we have the fountain of youth in here. They don't realize that they are the fountain. That is such a beautiful fucking line. That might be my favorite line I've ever heard about a vampire, ever. And that's from Claudia. She says that as they are playing their Mardi Gras ball. That is a big focus of this episode.
Yeah. There were so many scenes and lines. There's one particular moment at the end where I leapt backwards and was like, oh shit. I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is a great line. I love that whole scene after the ball where they're standing around. Basically, like you said, this episode, they basically realize it's time to leave New Orleans. After all this time, they have to leave. Things are getting too much there. It eventually, when you stay in one spot as a vampire for too long, the questions become, they stop becoming questions and the fingers start to get pointed. And the whole idea of, what was it? The one guy who shows Claudia the picture and he's like, here's a picture of me with your dad's in, 30 years ago. Do you notice anything wrong with this picture? And she's like, yeah, you have a terrible mustache in the picture. Right. And yeah, they have not aged during this show, but time has passed in this show from the beginning. It's been 30 plus years. The show starts in, I think, 1910, and now we're in World War II.
Yeah.
So that's 30 years. And of course, Lestat and Louis have not aged a day. Claudia is 36 years old, except she's still a teenager.
Right.
And they realize it is time to get out of New Orleans. But before they do that, they want to send off the city with this huge masquerade ball for Mardi Gras.
Right.
And they're going to go on a hunger strike so that they're really hungry at the end of the ball and they can kind of have this final feast.
Yes.
And there's this great moment, like you said, where they are the fountain, where they're going to give a boutonniere to several guests, and they're going to be the ones that stay on the promise of eternal life. Right. I love Lestat's, he's all three of them kind of line up and they talk about the Philosopher's Stone and how they found the elixir of life.
Right.
And they reveal their real ages to this group of people. Yeah. And they actually believe that they're getting the elixir of life. After all, they know these two men. They've been the same age for 30 years.
Right.
And then they open up the pot thinking that the liquid is in there. There's nothing there.
Nope.
And they all go crazy. And it's this glorious, bloody scene at the end of the episode.
The Interview with the Vampire movie from the 90s had some intense violence and some disturbing scenes. I remember Oprah was really disgusted with it because they would eat the rats off the floor, right? But this scene that you're talking about is like something out of 30 Days of Night. It's this vampire slaughter in this house, this locked house.
That's a really good comparison, because these are like the most beautiful vampires we've ever seen in terms of, especially the two leads. Claudia, her character is a teenager. Bailey Bass is 19, so I'm not that creepy, but they're like beautiful specimens as vampires, but they're also like psychotically feral during this moment, with the blood dripping down them. The scene in particular that I mentioned earlier, where I leapt backwards, you probably imagine, is when Louis rips the jaw off of this one guy, and he's alive, but like jawless, just and blood gushing, and Louis is holding his jaw in the palm. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I've seen it all in horror, and that made me legit like just be like, wow. Like Athena was like, okay, I'm leaving the room. Don't tell me. And because Athena and I have watched every episode together, but in order for me to get this review out with you, I had to watch this episode. I'm probably going to rewatch it with her later tonight.
Yeah, it's definitely worth rewatching. And there's a lot of intense gore besides that jaw. There's a part where Claudia bites a person's like eyeball out of their head. There's multiple people that get slaughtered in that sequence, and it just keeps going, right? And I think that what we should point out is that this whole plan, this Mardi Gras ball that leads to this slaughter, is all just to distract Lestat. It's to set Lestat up because Claudia and Louis have decided to kill him.
Yeah.
And so
that's where our review of episodes 1 through 6 ended, because the very last thing where episode 6 ends is the two of them basically saying, we have to kill Lestat.
Right.
And that's what this ball is all about. And I love, like, you really get these two actors. They're so freaking good. Jacob Anderson.
Yeah.
I feel like we kind of shortchanged him in our review, only because we were both kind of gushing over Sam Reed as Lestat.
Yeah. Right.
But my goodness, Jacob Anderson is so good on this show.
Yeah.
And in this episode, the way he keeps, like, his part of the distraction is to basically allow himself to fall back deeply in love with Lestat, which is how he became a vampire in the first place.
Right.
And like, you could tell, and this goes all the way to the very end of the episode, how like he was almost an unwilling accomplice to Claudia's plan. And how this, like, the whole idea of killing Lestat, he was on board with it, but it killed him inside. Whatever was left of his soul, like, it kills him to have to kill Lestat, who is effectively just an abusive lover to him.
Right.
Like in so many relationship movies and dramas and in real life, you find yourself in love with your abuser, and he is. And I love the scene with them dancing, and they share that kiss on the dance floor, and the irony and the hypocrisy of this crowd of New Orleans upper class people who are dressed effeminately. They're wearing wigs. The one guy has his face completely painted, and then he sees two men kissing, and he's like, that's it? I can't be a part of this. And it's just that glorious moment of the two of them going, we're done here. So no more like hiding anything, no more charades. This is who we are. We're a couple, we're kissing in public. Fuck you if you don't like it. And then we're going to go back and murder a bunch of people. And I can't say enough things about this show. I'm so glad the finale lived up to my expectations, because accidentally, this became my favorite show of 2022. And
Awesome.
And in a year where we've been covering horror all year, and we have said repeatedly on this channel, what a freaking great year for horror. And that's like all the year on Twitter and in the horror community is, my goodness, what a great year for horror.
Yeah.
Like this is part of it. Like the TV that we're getting, whether it's Chucky, which has been great, whether it's this, it's the final season of The Walking Dead. You can't go 10 seconds on AMC without seeing
Yeah.
a commercial for The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
So there's just so much quality horror on TV, in the theaters, on streaming. And it just, this year, I'm nervous that the year is ending and that like 2023 has so much to live up to.
Yeah. I think that the reason behind that is because by now, movie studios, television studios, they've sort of recovered from COVID in some form. And it's like, it's not anymore of like, oh, well, this is delayed and this is, I mean, you still hear talk of that, but I think at this point, all this stuff is like sort of post COVID inspired stuff. Now, whether it's a retelling of something like this or something original like Pearl or Barbarian or whatever, I think that like it's this cathartic way of dealing with the fucking misery of our lives for like the past 4 or 5 years. Just the world's been a dark place, and I think that's the reason why horror is so good right now, is because like people want it, we need it. Like this show with like COVID, for instance, it's kind of an interesting thing to compare COVID to this, because people were trapped indoors with their abusers because of shelter in place. And
Yeah.
Claudia and Louis are trapped with Lestat. First of all, they're trapped inside during the day because they can't go outside because of the sunlight, but they're trapped with Lestat because he's so powerful. And so this episode is extremely liberating because they finally get their freedom at the very end. Now, there's a few twists. One of the best twists is, I mentioned this last time, that I've not read the Interview with the Vampire book, but I've seen the 1994 movie. In the 94 movie, they have Lestat drink the blood of two twins, and he notices that they've made him drink poisoned blood, and then Claudia slices his throat, right? And then he bleeds out on the carpet, and they dump him in the swamp, just like you said last time. And a big alligator goes into the swamp, and you're like, oh, I guess that got Lestat. In this, you're waiting for that moment, and it's so close. He's almost going to bite the neck of this drugged twin, but then he pushes his little fingers into the twin's neck and spurts out blood. He's like, something's different here. And then we find out that this woman, Antoinette, who's an original character for this show, he's turned her into a vampire. And because she's his progeny, she's able to pick up the thoughts of Louis and Claudia. And so it was so important that they did that chess sequence last episode, because they showed that Claudia was still thinking 2 steps ahead of him, and in this situation, she was 2 steps ahead of him once again. Because then it was like, it made so much more sense that they were able to outthink him, and that she actually knew about Antoinette, and they were still able to defeat Lestat too. So
that was one thing I was a little confused by. I thought that it had to be the blood of a dead, like I thought it had to be drinking the blood of the dead. Yeah. I didn't realize that like poison blood, because the guy he killed that was poisoned was very much alive when he killed him. And so it was I guess like just like the drinking of poisoned blood, because it feels like poison would affect a human, not necessarily a vampire. But I guess if it's poisoning the blood and then vampires live off blood, then yeah, I guess it would. So it was a little at first I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, I did like that, because and you brought up that chess sequence. My God, that chess sequence in episode 6 is just brilliant television, because it's been like this thing where they're going back and forth, and it's like Lestat's reaction to losing a game of chess to somebody who he didn't view as an equal to him is like the first step of him unraveling, so to speak. Right. And that was really the way Claudia showed Louis because she's
Right.
talking to Louis telepathically while she's beating him in chess,
Right.
and kind of like see how he's unraveling. This is why we have to kill him.
Right.
And it's just a brilliant scene, and it really great the way that they what's the expression where they kind of set you up to think one thing, but then
misdirect.
Yeah, well, they just like they misdirected us to think that it was this twin. And it's funny because I didn't remember everything from the 94 movie. You reminded me of the twins. So now I'm sitting here watching it going, oh, this is how they get them, because I remember Pete told me about the twins.
Right.
And so it doubly got me because of our review. I was thinking of, okay, it's got to be these twins. The one guy's throwing up on the floor. Okay, he's dead in the chair. All right. So it got me doubly in this episode.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's this great ending, and then we see Louis slice his throat, and it's filled in such a way where it's very emotional. You can tell that it's super difficult for him to do it, and Lestat seems like kind of pathetic when he gets his throat slit. They take his blood and use it as ink to write "Put Me in My Coffin" into one of Claudia's books. But then there's these missing pages from the diary that take out this one sequence that happens next. And you find out, because Daniel's not buying it, you find out that Louis, instead of having them put Lestat in the furnace and burn his body, which would have destroyed him, he wants him kept in this, coffin, essentially, or this box. And then they threw him out with the trash. And I love the sequence when they were talking about like the trash being taken to the dump and stuff. Because at one point they show the dump, and then they show like Lestat's hand come out of the crate, like grab a rat. I just love that so much. We know he's going to come back. He'll probably come back at like the end of the first episode of season 2. But it makes me wonder, because if we're going by the Interview with the Vampire 1994 movie, which I'm sure follows the book, Lestat is absent for a big portion of the movie.
See, I was thinking, are they going to maybe do season 2? And if it's another 7-episode season, are they going to do like maybe 5 episodes and then bring him back towards the ending of the season to really stir up like a season 2 finale kind of thing?
Yeah.
Also, that was the other thing where it's like, so he's dead, but because his body wasn't burned, he's not really dead, obviously. It's like, I mean, you see his hand grab a rat.
Yeah, he wasn't totally dead. Like he could recover, because you had to either decapitate him or burn his body or something. He wasn't like totally dead. He's very powerful to begin with. And we finally see, because you and I had this discussion last week about whether Louis' partner or like his assistant was a vampire or not. And so, I thought that he wasn't, because he was walking around in daylight and, Louis was feeding on him. I was like, that doesn't make sense. But then we find out he actually is a vampire. And do you remember Armand from the 1994 movie?
Antonio Banderas.
Exactly. So I think that in itself was kind of a misdirect as well, because I don't remember if Armand is literally from like Spain or from that part of the country or the world. But here they cast him as like, I mean, I'm assuming he's from like the Middle East, that actor, He didn't seem Spanish to me at all.
No, I mean, I like the idea though. I mean, I like the idea of that scene at the end was so well done, where Daniel is just like really calling Louis out on a bunch of his bullshit. Like, okay, yeah. I don't believe this story. Let me tell you what I think happened. You obviously didn't kill Lestat for a reason.
Right.
Here's what happened. I live near a dump with my first wife. He gets real like New York, real like, East Coast with him.
Yeah.
And the assistant is kind of like, you have to leave him alone. You don't want to go there. And you're kind of like, all right, underling, why are you getting so involved? And then all of a sudden he takes a step back and he just starts levitating. And you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So with the book that he threw down at the end, is he trying to say, is he older than Lestat?
Oh, absolutely he is. Yeah, he says he's like 500 years old.
Okay.
In the 1994 movie, Armand says that he's the oldest living vampire in the world, which we later find out he's not, but like he thinks he is.
Okay.
Armand is like in charge of that theater troupe of vampires in France or whatever in the
Yes.
movie. But just one little side thing I want to say about Armand is that I'm not sure if Armand and Louis are a couple in the books. I think they are, because all the supporting characters and all the various characters do continue on in the different books, right? And I just wanted to, while we were doing this review, just kind of go through what books are actually in this series real quick. So Interview with the Vampire, that's what the show is based on. That came out in 1976, almost 50 years ago at this point. The next one of my favorite books of all time, came out in 1985, The Vampire Lestat. That tells Lestat's origin and brings us up to date, right? Then you have Queen of the Damned, which unfortunately was not adapted very well with the Aaliyah starring movie. Then you have The Tale of the Body Thief in 92, Memnoch the Devil in 1995, and then here, this is where it gets interesting. The next book is called The Vampire Armand. So I think that goes into his life and talks about his story. There's more. Eventually, the last book in the series, I'm not going to read all of them. The title of the last book is Prince Lestat and the Realms of Atlantis, which came out in 2016. And it reveals even more about the origins of the vampires. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it gets pretty fucking weird out there.
Is Namor the original Dracula?
I think he might. Yeah, I think that the first vampire had one of those heart-shaped herbs underwater, and that's how this all happened.
It was all because of vibranium. Okay.
Yes. Spoilers for Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, which you can see the review from me and Brian on my other channel, Comic Books Transformed. But anyway, they have a wealth of books to draw from. There's 12 of these vampire novels.
You said that there's crossover between this universe and the Mayfair Witches,
right?
Which, just like with The Walking Dead, you can't go 10 minutes on AMC without seeing Alexandra Daddario, and the previews and like interviews setting up the Mayfair Witches.
Right.
And I know that Anne Rice has a book called Lasher. And I saw them like etch the name Lasher into a piece of wood. So I guess that's part of the Mayfair Witches saga.
Yep.
So maybe that's going to tie in to this. It seems like AMC is going hard on the Anne Rice legacy now that, it's unfortunate she just passed away. I think 2021?
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. And, she was in many ways like the female contemporary of Stephen King. Like for all of Stephen King being, late 70s, 76 was Carrie. That's when Carrie came out.
Yeah.
Or like right before 76, because the movie came out in 76. So I think,
are you the one that always says that Stephen King is the better storyteller, but Clive Barker's the better writer? You say that, don't you?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like maybe that going with that analogy, I think that Anne Rice is the contemporary to Clive Barker.
Okay.
Because she's always been provocative, always pushed the envelope like Barker. Stephen King kind of pushes the envelope, but not as much as those two. And then her writing, she has very beautiful prose. Like I love her writing, So I think she's a better writer than Stephen King. Or was,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking smack about Stephen King as an author. I just feel like he writes the way, like his dialogue feels like the way people talk.
Right.
And a lot of his writing is based around like the details and the dialogue of the characters. And his characters are the best.
Absolutely.
Clive Barker is very literary, and provocative is a great word. And that's what I think I remember my dad talking about Anne Rice a lot, because he was a big Anne Rice fan also.
Yes.
And it's just, she was like the female horror writer of the last 50 years, really. I mean, you listed off the books in that in the Interview with a Vampire series, and then she has the Mayfair Witches saga. I mean, this is a woman who had, you know, multiple adaptations of her work done before. So I'm real happy. I mean, look, if you have those three names, and there's always Stephen King adaptations being done. There's been a new Hellraiser adaptation done. There was a Candyman movie made last year, which is based on a Clive Barker story. And now you have AMC has given us my favorite horror series of the year based on Anne Rice. So like you said, it could just be we're coming out of COVID and there's a lot more, like, you know, horror in the world, but there's also just this there's this tremendous wealth of horror that's been written in the last 50 years that is just there to be adapted.
Very well put. Very well put. Yeah, I agree. And they are killing it so far with this series. I hope Mayfair Witches is somewhere in the same league as this. I think that they already kind of were starting to allude to it in this episode, where they would show like the kind of like witchcraft stuff that was at their door before you know, Lestat said they should move. Like they were starting to get like things on their door, and they were like weird little like piles of ash and stuff in front of their door.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that has to do with the witches too. Yeah, and Lasher is a character in those Mayfair Witch books, which I need to listen to those again. It's called the Immortal Universe. That's what they're building on AMC with these shows. I was just thinking, like, with season 2, we're probably going to see Louis and Claudia go over to Europe, and they're going to meet Armand and the Theater of Vampires. And then, you know, we'll see what happens. I don't want to kind of spoil things if people are kind of new to the series. But then I think that by season 3, if this keeps going strong, we're going to maybe get the Vampire Lestat book, and maybe they'll start going through the other books too. But it's really great.
I don't want to be without Sam Reed for too long. But at the same time, I think it would be great for the story to really let Louis and Claudia and Armand breathe, and have, like, I really don't want him to be back at the end of the next episode. That to me feels like a trope of so many horror shows like Supernatural and Vampire Diaries, and even Buffy, where, like, for years you'd watch an episode of these shows and they'd be like, I can't believe they just killed that character. And then they're back 20 minutes into the next episode. And you're like, oh, like Sam and Dean die every 12 episodes, you know, on Supernatural. And then, like, oh, we went into hell and we got them. They're back.
Yeah, piece of cake. Yeah.
Charlotte just came in from the kitchen and was like, yeah, it's true, because she's watching Supernatural with Athena now.
I don't want to go on a Supernatural tangent, but the first 5 seasons of Supernatural are pretty fucking great, and then the 5th season is fantastic. Then it just keeps going, you know.
I watched the first, I think it was 12 seasons of Supernatural, and I really enjoyed it, but it just got to a point where I was done. Like, I couldn't, you know, like, I'll give you a perfect analogy. I think to me, Supernatural felt like The Simpsons, where I loved The Simpsons. I was a monster Simpsons fan when I was a kid, when I was an adult, but, like, I feel like I haven't watched The Simpsons in 20 years. And they're still making new episodes of The Simpsons. And I'm like, I can't go back and catch up now. There's too much. You know? And it felt like Supernatural just wouldn't end. And I had to just jump ship at one point, you know?
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, we'll see how far this show goes. I mean, who knows? They keep talking about The Walking Dead coming to an end. There's only 1 episode left, and that feels like that's been on for like ages too. We don't know how, like, maybe this is where AMC is putting all of their horror ducks in this Anne Rice Immortal Universe. Go ahead.
No, I'm totally okay with that, because I have not been like you. I've not been in on The Walking Dead for what feels like a lifetime,
a decade.
and I have no interest in any of the Evil Dead. That's not true. Walking Dead spin-offs.
Right.
Whereas I'm all in on the Immortal universe, if that's what they're calling it. I'm all, yeah. And come to think of it, on Twitter, the Interview with a Vampire Twitter is like at Immortal _ AMC,
Right.
I think.
Right. You're
So,
right.
so that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I'm all in on this universe. The acting is so good. The writing is great. I would put this season, just these 7 episodes, up against the 1994 movie. I think that the two leads are collectively better than Pitt and Cruz. I love the fact that they are, this gay couple. I think that adds so much to the drama around them, about how like Louis can't live without Lestat. I do love that aspect of it. I think that making him black added a lot to,
Absolutely.
especially in New Orleans in the turn of the century, early 1900s, where,
Absolutely.
not to get historical on you as a history teacher, but like Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court case that legalized segregation, that made segregation legal, happened in Louisiana. It was a Louisiana train car that the Supreme Court said it's perfectly fine to separate the races as long as the conditions are equal, which became the basis for legal segregation until Brown versus Board of Ed.
Oh,
When I
wow.
was in New Orleans, they have a Plessy versus Ferguson like mural right in the French Quarter, which of course I was like, oh, I gotta take a picture of that.
Yeah.
So it's like, that was 1896. So this story starts like not even 15 years after that Supreme Court case. So making Louis black added so much to a lot of the story.
Yeah.
And I hope they don't do like a Stranger Things where we have to wait like 2.5 years for another season.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping like we get this, maybe next fall. I think this would be a great, right back into spooky season. Like the sun is starting to go down on summer. Let's bring back the vampires.
So well put. So well put. I think that's a good way to kind of bring this all to a close. I'm hoping that the vampires return then too. I think they are, just because like it seems like they're trying to build this universe. They're putting a lot of money and effort into this. So I think they're going to want to keep that blood flowing. So anyway, we got to keep the blood flowing on the Lasser Cast. If you guys have not subscribed to our channel, please do. I know we got a bunch of new subscribers recently. We got a shit ton of comments on our last interview with the vampire video. We love hearing from you guys. Please bring us some more.
Yes.
Let us know what you thought about the finale. Besides that, we talked about Stephen King a little bit this episode. I interviewed Tom Holland, the director of Child's Play and of Fright Night, and that video is going to go up within the next week. And he and I talk about Stephen King because he directed The Langoliers. He directed
right.
Thinner too. So we have this whole little discussion about Stephen King, and he makes this really awesome point about Stephen King. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. So that's an interview I got coming up. I just interviewed my friend Joshua McMillan. He has an awesome book called The Death House that's out right now. You can check out that video. And Danny, you said you were going to cover Chucky, right?
Yeah, I have a couple episodes of Chucky that I have to review. I'll get that video up before Wednesday because that's when the next episode of Chucky comes out. I think we're up to the penultimate episode of season 2. And I know that the Mayfair Witches starts in January. I think we should definitely cover that.
Absolutely.
Coming off of this show, I'm like really interested in checking that out. I might even try to like read the audiobook for it before, just to see, because I feel like it'll. I'm due for another audiobook at this point.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, on the we're also eventually within the next week or so, we're going to be reviewing the new Shudder movie Resurrection with Rebecca Hall.
Yes.
One of the just most interesting and
Mhm.
like a movie that I feel like I could talk about for a long time. I
Mhm.
don't know if we are going to talk about it for that long, but a movie that definitely evokes a lot of conversation.
Mhm.
Tremendous acting, another great horror movie in 2022. And just, Shudder and all things horror, just keep an eye out for the channel. We'll be posting a lot of stuff soon.
As always, that's right. So make sure you're a part of the Lasso Cast, and we will see you guys next time.